So I don't know if this means something to trap bears or bears in the trap, and the trap's there for you. But it doesn't seem to me that the idea of initiation should be talked about as a separate undertaking from the undertaking of trying to come to an understanding of what constitutes your sense of being human. And I think the deep challenge on this matter might come to this, to put it simply, though not fully. It could be this. So I'm being interviewed by a couple of guys on one of their podcasts. And one of them's in Western Canada, one's somewhere in the United States. And I've come to realize now that podcast tends to mean a couple of guys who are living in their mother's basement, twisting some dials and asking you things. So they called themselves, I can't even remember now, it was such a bad name. And the younger of the two of them came to a question which was so monumental in its courage, frankly, that I was stopped. Not because he was young, but because it was so courageous. It was courageous by any demographic or age standard. That's my point here. So I think we're talking about the dying stuff, because I was the death guy at the time, and to some people still am. And he said to me, I have a question for you. Okay? He said, now, I don't know if you know this, it's going to sound like science fiction to you. By which he's trying to establish my relative age and kind of social alertness, right? My tech savvy. And he's already decided, based on the sound of my voice, probably not so much. Kind of an analog kind of guy. So he says, so it's going to sound like science fiction to you, and you can already hear him doing this to me. But, and he said, it's probably too late for you. He said, so, but they're working on a serum, he said. And they're working on it as we speak. And within a generation, 2 at the most, it's going to come online. That's the phrase he used. And I said, yeah, okay, what's that? He said, well, it's a serum that's going to, if you take it, you won't have to die. That's the way he characterized it. So before I go on with the story, if you just investigate the prejudice that's in his characterization, a lot appears that he wasn't intending to appear. So if you take the serum, you won't have to die. Well, you can hear a clear and obvious grudge against the prospect of having to obey this thing called ending. You won't have to. Finally. Stuff's finally starting to work out over here. You won't have to knuckle under that shit and so on. That was all there. You won't have to die. I said, okay, yeah. So what's the question? He said, well, my question is this. If I take the serum and I don't have to die, what will I miss? And that was amazing. That was an amazing act of discernment for him to reconfigure the question that if you get what you really want, there could be a downside. An absolutely unanticipated and rather wicked downside, too. That was in there. So I considered that a high water mark in the questions that I've been asked over the years. And I told him so. And as is my wont, given that I'm lucky enough to have a school, my understanding of learning might be a little uncommon, I don't know. But it has to do with the reward system for learning is to burden and employ the recently learned something. Not to reward it by leaving it alone, which is the standard public education system. I say, get the right answer as quickly as possible, and then duck for the rest of the class. And nobody will look at you again, because you're smart and they'll work with the middling types instead. So, I said to him, fabulous question. And to imagine that you would lose something or miss something from not dying sets you apart from probably most of your peers and I'll bet you're not really popular at parties. I said. He said, not too much. I said, so you're not alone, man. I don't get invited at all. So here's the thing, though. I'm going to offer you another question. In fair trade, I hope, for the question that you were able to come up with. And here's what it is. I'll put it to you my way. He said, okay, great. I said, so if you take the serum, you won't be able to die. Which I think puts the emphasis on the right syllable. You take the serum, you won't be able to die. Which immediately recast dying as something of a skill, not an affliction. Something of an ability, not an insult. Something that needs to be practiced and learned and deeply to become acquainted with. Not something to hold off at all costs for as long as is humanly and inhumanly possible. I haven't even asked the question yet, and I'm already applying at least a tapu, what's the word I need? On the skin. Thank you very much. I was trying to make it a bigger word than it is. A topical kind of anesthetic to the incision. And I said, so if you take the serum, you won't be able to die, and if you're not able to die, I think the real question is, what will the rest of us miss? And I tell it to you, and I'm bragging by saying on very short notice I was able to come up with that, following his lead and then dragging it a little bit further up the mountain than he was inclined to do. And that's the difference between our ages right there, in a nutshell. Because I was asking him to consider that the fundament of his concern is not personal well-being. Not really. The fundament of his concern, the place from which his sorrowful question actually rises, is the utter abandonment of the commons, if you will, of the world in favor of the inner life. The only one that you seem to be able to stake any claim to. You know, there's an allegation called a personal self that one has principal allegiance to the exclusion of any other self. And to be confused in that matter and imagine yourself to have twin allegiances to others, for example, constitutes you becoming, codependent. Now, last time I checked, the word codependent should not be used, or at least owned, by the people who've claimed ownership over the word, warning you away from any kind of codependence. And simply investigate the word itself. What does it say? Well, there's a couple, or at least there's several. And then dependence, well, that's kind of how it is, actually. And the allegation of independence is the real codependence. And codependence, that's the natural order of things. And our very existence requires our codependence upon the world. And the amazing thing is, the world's not that dependent on us. Now, we've changed that considerably, obviously, that the world more and more requires us to be human at the very time when we're uncertain what the word even means. And if you think I'm overstating that one, consider that we have the word human in the English language, and then we add an E on the end. Are these synonyms? Why do we have two words so close to the same thing, at least in spelling? Well, one simple E changes everything, right? Because if you traffic in the notion that human beings are born, more or less inevitably occurring as a consequence of being a bipedal, upright life form, if that's what makes you human, then of course your humanity is absolutely inalienable. That's one. Two, you don't have to do anything to cultivate it, to learn much about it. It's kind of yours to do with as you see fit. Now it's kind of a personal possession in the same way your car is, and your lawn, and all of that, your intentions, right? Your personal meaning, your personal wisdom, and so on. You banish any substantive challenge to the notion that humanity is actually something that you might have to catch up to. We have the word humane to acknowledge the possibility that humans are capable of revoltingly inhuman behavior. That's what the E is there for. to signal to us humans that our humanity is not the get-out-of-jail card that makes us good, that makes us tolerable or even bearable to our fellows. So we have the word humane as some kind of guidance system that's attached to us being human. Because being human in and of itself appears not to be quite enough, because we can go off the rails with maddening frequency, right? Okay, so you're scholars of this material in a way that I'm not. So if I'm inadvertently preaching to the choir or belaboring the obvious, just signal to me, go, we know this. Get on to it. And I'll be happy to skip the preliminaries.